Today I'm going to talk about how one email, one lie, one act of willful blindness in a business meeting can destroy your life and send you to federal prison. Hi, this is Justin Paperny with White Collar Advice, and today I'm going to share my story of what led me to federal prison. And the reason that I'm going to do this is because I want people who hire me or reach out to me to hold me accountable. When people reach out to me, and since 2009 I've worked with more than 1,000 white collar defendants, when I have a call scheduled or when I reach out to them, I'll frequently ask them, what is your story? Tell me the circumstances that led to this predicament. Some can do it beautifully. Some, admittedly, are still coming to terms with the situation. Some cannot do it at all. And sometimes 15 or 20 minutes into the conversation, I'll have to stop them and say, I know nothing more about your story. I don't really understand any of the circumstances, and there's a lot of rambling. I get it. I was there. But I am telling you if you were watching, and the reason that I'm going to do this video, if you can tell me your story, I will tell you your future. I am convinced of it. Look, I know we lock up too many people in this country. We are drunk on incarceration. So many wonderful people who made an out of character mistake get into the crosshairs of the criminal justice system, unfairly punished and sent away. And there is a two-tiered system of justice. I mean, look at Dennis Hastert, the former Speaker of the House, second in line to be President of the United States. Molested little boys 30 or 40 years ago. Yes, they get him on some financial crime. I think he was looking at up to 5 years in prison. He gets 15 months. I assure you, you know what the government loves? The low-hanging fruit. The doctors, the lawyers, the businessmen, the good people who in an out-of-character moment made a mistake and might not have the power or the influence to get a lower sentence or to have the case go away. So I'm sharing the story today because regardless of the unfairness that might exist, regardless of someone like Dennis Hastert who molested boys 30 or 40 years ago getting 15 months in federal prison, while great people who might have engaged in insider trading or made some bad and stupid decisions, they get 3, 4, 5 years. They get 10 years. They get 15 years. The disconnect, the dichotomy bothers me, and I'm sharing my story because you have to overcome and learn to tell that story, even on days you might not want to. And that's what it takes to succeed. So I'm now going to transition into the story that led me to federal prison. I was raised in Encino, which is a Jewish enclave outside of Los Angeles. And as a young boy, I loved and lived for baseball. It was my entire life. And my parents gave me the opportunities to play as much as I liked. And not only did my parents hold me accountable, I had coaches that held me accountable. They reinforced the importance of discipline, of developing character at a very young age. In fact, if I was late to practice, I didn't play. I was held accountable. And as I transitioned from a young athlete into becoming a student athlete at USC, those same principles remained. I graduated Montclair Prep High School in 1993, and I went to USC, where I was a member of the baseball team. And look, as soon as I got to USC, I knew that my baseball career was going to be over. Okay, I was around guys that were 6'4", 6'5", 230 pounds, could run, could hit, could throw, could do things that I could never do. So the second I got to USC, I knew that my baseball career was going to end. I knew that I'd have to develop a skill set. And I initially had an interest in psychology. My parents were going through a very terrible divorce. 1993, the riots hit in Los Angeles. My father's business was struggling. Again, they were going through a divorce. I was graduating high school. There was a lot of turmoil in my life. So when I got to USC, I had an interest in psychology and helping other people. And that's ultimately what I got my degree in psychology. But things changed for me my sophomore summer at USC. I had a very distant cousin who was a money manager at Goldman Sachs, and my mom reached out to him and said, my son has interest in the brokerage business. Would you let him come down and spend some time with you? And he was a little reluctant, but he agreed. And I remember showing up in downtown Los Angeles to Goldman Sachs at 4 a.m., walking in a suit and tie. And I said to my cousin, I'm here to learn. And he looked at me and sort of sized me up and said, okay, so you're the baseball player. Or what are you going to do after college? And I said, I want to become a stockbroker. And I'm studying psychology, but I have a lot of friends that I play baseball with, and they're going to get these big contracts, and I can help them. And he said, you have to get an MBA. And I'm thinking, I don't want to get an MBA. And I said, well, I just want to be a stockbroker. And he said, essentially, you're going to be a salesman. You have got to continue to pursue your education. That was some of the initial advice I began to ignore. I was short-sighted. I wanted to graduate and begin to manage money. I learned a lot from him at Goldman Sachs. I love the excitement of the trading, $50, $100 million bond trades. It was very, like I said, exciting. Like when I was playing baseball in front of 20,000 people, the roar of the crowd, it was just as exciting to hear a large trade or the closing of a big account. I was totally hooked, and I knew that when I graduated USC, which I did in 1997, I wanted to become a stockbroker. And I began to have some success. Also spent some time interning at Prudential, where I was cold calling, and I frankly wasn't that impressed with the brokers that I was working with, and they gave me $20 every time I got a lead on the phone. So I was incentivized to call, and I love getting on the phone, and I love hustling. And it worked, because when I graduated in 1997 from USC, I accepted a position at Merrill Lynch in Orange County. I was seeing a girl at the time. I had thought that maybe at some point we'd get engaged, and right off the bat I got a little bit homesick. She was still in Los Angeles. I was down in Orange County, and honestly, I'm a bit of a mama's boy too. It was hard to be that. It's hard to be so far away from my mom and also my dad. So after about 6 months, I grew tired of commuting from Orange County to Los Angeles. I got permission to transfer to the Merrill Lynch office in Encino, and that's where I learned very early that corporate cultures can be quite different from one office to the next. The culture at the Merrill Lynch office in Orange County was very much tone at the top, say one thing, follow through on it. If you don't do it, you're going to be held accountable. The Merrill Lynch office in Encino, it was measurably different, and you were treated in part based on how much you produced, and that would be a theme throughout my whole career. But at Merrill Lynch, after 6 or 7 months, I had obtained my license, and I had my first dilemma. My branch manager called me into his office and said, "Justin, I'd like you to partner with another broker." And I was very reluctant to merge my book of business at such a young age with a senior broker, and I'll tell you why. I did a lot of watching when I was a young broker, and I noticed a lot of the younger brokers merging their book of business too quickly with the senior broker, under the idea that if you merge your book of business with someone that has more experience, it's going to lead to eternal life in the business. There's no way you could flunk out of the business if your mentor has been doing this 20 or 30 years. But as I saw these brokers merging their book of business, or the younger brokers, many of them were flunking or failing out of the business. And then one day in the human resource room, a senior broker had said that he raised more than $10 million under management. And I said, "Well, how did you do it? How did you raise the money? Business manager, agent, divorce attorney? Where did you get the money?" And this broker said, "Well, a few of the guys with whom I was mentoring and working with, it didn't quite work out." In other words, he inherited their book of business, and ostensibly he was mentoring them, but he was not. And I saw these brokers growing their books of business by leveraging off the younger brokers they were supposed to be mentoring. And at that time, as a very young stockbroker at Merrill Lynch, I felt like it was everyone out for themselves. Slowly, that's when I began to sink, but I did hold my ground, because when the branch manager said, "We want you to merge your book of business," and I said no, he gave me an ultimatum. Now, I'm one of those people who have given an ultimatum and make probably or maybe the wrong decision. I do not like ultimatums. So rather than succumbing to join a partnership, because I loathed many of these senior brokers that were leveraging off of the young brokers, I left Merrill Lynch. I went to a firm called Crow Wheaton. And at Crow Wheaton, I worked hard. I was a young broker in sort of a small regional brokerage firm. I tried to grow my book of business through cold calling. Admittedly, I was not a very good cold caller. So I took to the streets. If you've ever cold walked, I have a lot of admiration for you, because it ain't easy. And as a young broker at Crow Wheaton, I would walk down Ventura Boulevard, walk into business offices and say, "My name is Justin Paperny. I'm a stockbroker with Crow Wheaton. Sorry to bother you in your office. We have some good ideas. Can I call you tonight? Can I call you tomorrow?" Yes, some people looked at me like, "Who is this kid? Is he insane? He's in this office soliciting, hustling?" But that's what it took. I had $60,000 in student loans from USC. I had a BMW I thought I had to have, because I was told if you're going to manage more than $1 million or ask people who are millionaires to manage their money, you have to have the car and the Rolex and the suits to look like you have that money yourself. So right off the bat, I was in debt and had a big lifestyle upon graduating from USC while I was asking people for money. So I had to hustle by cold walking, and it worked. In fact, some doctors and businessmen said to me, "You got a lot of walking in here. I'm pretty impressed that you have the courage to do this." And it worked, because I raised $3 million and $5 million and $10 million simply by cold walking into businesses. I learned a lot about sales and asking for the order. Well, my first 2 years in the business, I was reluctant to reach out to many of the athletes that I had played baseball with at USC. Many of them had big bonuses, some were already in the big leagues, and frankly, it's much different to be told no from a prospect or someone that you don't know than it is to be told no from a friend. So I initially didn't reach out to them, because I thought they might see me as Justin, the guy they were teammates with and partied and lived with at USC, rather than as a money manager and stockbroker. So I waited. But after 2 years, I knew to really grow and make money, I'd have to go into that business. So I reached out to a gentleman named Danny Lozano, an agent at the Beverly Hills Sports Council, who represented a number of the players that I worked with. And I think even today he has clients like Alex Rodriguez, but at the time he had Jose Canseco and Barry Bonds and some really, Trevor Hoffman, some really big hitters. So I knew Danny. So I had lunch with Danny at El Torito in Beverly Hills, and I said, "Bud, I'm in the brokerage business now. I'm working hard, gaining traction. I would love to represent some of your clients." And he chuckled and he said, "Justin, you're so young, you're new. Plus, you work for a firm called Crow Wheaton that I've never heard of. I can't send Mike Piazza to Crow Wheaton. I've never heard of this firm." And I said, "Well, I don't have loyalty to Crow Wheaton. I have loyalty to my clients to grow my book of business. I'll happily leave Crow Wheaton. No problem." And he said, "Well, let me introduce you to someone." And he introduced me to a gentleman named Kenny, who is a senior broker at Bear Stearns. And Kenny went to USC, like I did. He grew up not far from me in Encino. And he lined up this meeting. So here I am with Kenny discussing merging our book of business. And I mentioned a few minutes ago how against partnerships I was, because I saw what happened at Merrill Lynch. But in life, our values change. Right? At 25, with an opportunity to be the youngest broker that Bear Stearns would hire, my values changed to, yeah, I'd love to be that guy. And that was more important than, wow, I can never give into a partnership. So I agreed to work with Kenny, despite my knowing how bad partnerships can work out. So Kenny and I merged our book of business. The day we began working together, and I joined Bear Stearns after I left Crow Wheaton. Kenny had about $100 million under management. I had $40 million under management. Combine our book of business, that's about $140 million. Our agreement on the day that I joined Bear was that Kenny would get 75% of the commissions. I would get 25% of the commissions. After all, he'd been in the business longer. He had produced more. I was comfortable with that the day that we began. Well, something interesting happened after I went to Bear. I brought in a hedge fund client that was beginning to generate $100,000 a month in production every single month. I solicited the relationship, I closed him, I did the trades, $100,000 a month. So after about 6 months of heavy production, I did what any of you should do if you're outperforming. You ask for a raise. But you don't ask for a raise based on need or what it costs you to live. You ask for a raise based on evidence. And the evidence suggested that because of my production, I was worth more than 25% of the total book of business. So I printed out an Excel document with all of the data and commissions. I walked into my senior partner's office and I was like, boom. And I just sat back for a minute and waited for him to say, "Yeah, dude, you've really been producing. I'm going to take you from 25% to something." I didn't think it should be 50%, but I was thinking at least 3/8, right? Certainly a bonus. I'm doing the lion's share of the production. And instead of rewarding me or telling me that, yes, I'm due a raise, he essentially kicked me out of his office and told him that I should be grateful and patient and that I was at Bear Stearns because of him. And when I hear that, I was taken back to those young brokers at Merrill Lynch who were exploited, who other brokers took credit for their work and then flunked out of the business. And I was so angry at that moment that he didn't reward me and he never thanked me. It wasn't about money for me. I was making $300,000 a year. There's this belief in white-collar crime that it's all greed. Greed's not a symptom. That's not what drove me to cheat. It was vengeance. Vengeance to be appreciated. Vengeance to be told, "Thank you, I appreciate you," which I never got from him. So I began to take matters into my own hands, and feeling this pressure of just not being rewarded for my hard work, I got angry. I felt exploited. I began to rationalize this unfairness, that I was a team player and he was not. So when my partner was playing golf or at spring training the next week, and a client called in to do a $500 or $500,000 trade, which could lead to a $5,000 commission, I kept the whole commission. Now let's talk about that for a second. A couple of minutes ago, I told you that I was only due 25% and my partner 75%. I found a glitch in the system that would allow me to keep the whole $5,000. Client would call in and do another trade. I found a glitch in the system that would allow me to keep the whole commission. Now in my mind, I wasn't taking anything to which I wasn't entitled, that I hadn't earned. I was due a raise. The data suggested it. And I convinced myself that I was making the right decisions. And I remember at times driving home over Coldwater Canyon in Studio City. We didn't have iPhones back then, but they were like the trios, and you pull out the stylus. And I would calculate how much I had stolen from my partner that day. And I had a number in mind of how much I had to do to get even because he wouldn't reward me. It was vengeance that initially led me to cheat. But in time, unless you're a sociopath, I think your conscience can get the best of you. And I grew concerned and freaked out that at some point my partner or the compliance manager or branch manager would find out that I'm stealing. There's this great quote by Nietzsche, the existentialist philosopher, who said, "The value of something isn't what you attain with it, but what it costs you." Well, let's think about that for a second. I had attained the money, the commissions that I stole, that I thought I was entitled to. But what was it beginning to cost me? My health, my relationship. I was fat. I was miserable. I was drinking. I was smoking, chewing tobacco, 30, 40 pounds heavier than when I graduated USC as a student athlete. I had attained the money, but at what cost? My health and my morality. And I had to get the hell out of Bear Stearns. Had to start anew for fear that I would get caught. And in time, that opportunity came when Kenny called and said, "We have an opportunity to go to UBS, a competing brokerage firm across the street, and split a bonus of more than $1 million." I didn't even care about the money. I was like, yeah, let's leave. Let's start anew. It was an opportunity to get away and not having been caught for taking money, which was stealing every way you look at it. So in June of 2001, we went to UBS and had about $140 million at the time. And something interesting happened after we were at UBS for about 6 months. We only brought over about half of our book of business. So much like I arrogantly referred to data to justify as a raise, my branch manager did the same thing. And he'd say, "Justin, Kenny, we gave you $1 million. Where's the business? Where is the assets? Where's the production?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I'm calling my clients. I'm sending them the transfer paperwork. They're not signing and sending it back. I can hardly get them on the phone." And well, that's a problem. And then I started to see some brokers who had gotten a similar bonus getting let go, ostensibly for like an ethical violation. There was no ethical violation. They weren't producing. When you get a bonus like that, you sign your life away. They fire you. They come back and get the money. If those guys were producing at the level, they'd have been treated differently. That's the way Wall Street works, okay? There's a two-tiered system of justice. You get treated one way based on how you produce. You get treated another way based on how low you produce. That's the reality. And I was in the bad pool. Okay, I was in the bad guy group of not producing, and I knew they were going to find a way to get rid of me because they were unhappy at our lack of production. And finally, I got on the phone with a client who had several $1 million with us, and I said, "This is Justin. I'm at UBS." I told them that going to UBS was better for them. Of course, it was not. It was better for our pocketbook. But I told them we're at UBS. There's new products and services that would be of value for them, and we've sent you the transfer paperwork. Where is it? And this client laughed and chuckled and said, "Justin, I'll always like you. And I remember when you were in my office many years ago and you hustled me and I liked you and you were aggressive and you did a good job as a broker at first. And you made these promises that we'd have quarterly reviews, but you've forgotten about me. I'm too small for you. You're enthralled by these athletes that you go on the road to see and these hedge fund managers that you execute trades for." And I knew it then. I knew that as a result of neglecting my earlier clients who had given me my start, of obsessing over getting just compensations for my senior partner, of treating clients differently, that I had paid a heavy price. So it's not illegal to treat clients differently, but it is unethical. And if you're after your own interest, which is fine, it will crush and destroy your business. And that's why we had brought only half of our book of business over. We said one thing and did another, and UBS was not happy. So we worked hard. We scrambled to get our book of business back up, but we couldn't. You can't just replace $70 million in 3 days. And it changed for us the 16th of June, 2002, a year to the day after we went to UBS. And I received a call from a gentleman named Keith Gillibert, who was the manager of the GLT fund. Now, I knew Keith. I worked with Keith at Crowell Weedon. In fact, he was in the cubicle right next door to me. And Keith called to ask if he could transfer over his hedge fund that had around $6 million in it. He mentioned that he was at Bear Stearns in their prime brokerage department. He was unhappy, and he wanted to see if he could transfer his book of business over. I was like, "Dude, of course. We'd love to have you. Bring your money over. We're going to execute trades. It's all good to go." I knew that $6 million wasn't a ton of money, but I knew the commissions he would generate would get us back to a level that would satisfy upper management at UBS. So I said, "I'll come over tonight. I'll get the paperwork signed." I ran into my senior business partner's office. I was doing like this little dance. Like, "Dude, we're saved. We're good. We have a new client coming in." And Kenny said, "Well, who's the client? What's up?" I said, "Well, it's a guy named Keith I used to work with. He has a hedge fund he's going to transfer over." He's like, "Great. You want me to help? Anything I need to do?" I said, "No, bud, but there is something you need to know." He said, "What?" I said, "When I worked at Crowell Weedon, I work right next door to Keith." He's like, "Yeah, what's the point?" I'm like, "Well, I hear him say things on the phone that weren't always right." He's like, "Well, can you get more specific?" I'd say, "Well, I hear him misleading." And he's like, "Well, what are you getting at?" I said, "Dude, he would say anything to close a sale." And he'd say, "Give me an example." I said, "Okay, well, one time I remember him trying to sell Cisco systems. And some of the prospects or clients that he was on the phone with was reluctant. So in order to place the stock, I heard him make up lies. I heard him insinuate there was some inside information he had, and he always placed the stock, and he always got paid, and frankly, he always got rewarded. And I share that with you, and I shared it with Kenny because I knew the day I took his $6 million that things would end badly, but it was a values play. Do I judge my client's morality after I had been stealing from my partner, or was my highest value bringing in money, not questioning the morality or ethics of my client, and satisfying the $1 million bonus that I had received? It was a pretty easy decision. The money came in, and just like that, boom, our client's doing $50,000 a month in production, $100,000 a month in production. After 6 months, he's rocking and rolling. We're producing. We're back at the top of the production levels every single month. UBS management is happy, but something troubling happens. The $6 million he transferred in, gone, lost, down to zero. Now, it is not illegal to lose money, but after he lost the money, he continued to raise more money. And I would ask all of you watching, if a money manager came into your home and said, hello, Mrs. Smith, I'm down 100% over the last 6 months. I had $6 million, I've lost it, but I feel like things are going to change. I'd like your $2 million. What do you think? Would you give him the money? You'd say, get out of my home, get out of my office. Are you insane? Of course I'm not going to give you my money. So our initial inklings that he was misleading people was when the $6 million came in, after he had lost it. What investor in their right mind would give $6 million to a money manager that lost it all? I had a Series 7, a 63, a 65, an insurance license, a degree from USC. I was making money. I had clients. Of course we knew he was making misrepresentations. How else could he be raising money? But we turned the other way. We never spoke to the prospects or clients. We simply executed trades on an unsolicited basis. This is how it would go. Hi, Justin. This is Keith. Sell 40,000 calls at Brocade. Buy 25,000 shares of Microsoft. Great. Done. Unsolicited, 20 cents a commission. We're paid. It's that easy. He's raising the money. We house all of it at UBS. It was a brilliant business model. But in time, the losses continued. Again. And he's coming up on the monthly activity report every month. Heavy losses, complex trades. And Kenny and I grew nervous. We feared that if the losses continued, that we'd be sued civilly. You don't think about jail. When you're raised in a Encino with a silver spoon and privilege, and you don't know anyone that's been to federal prison, you don't think about jail, okay? You think, this could have some fallout. I could get sued civilly here. Eventually, he's going to lose more money, and we're the custodian, and the bank's the only one that's going to have the money. We better protect ourselves. So I was forward thinking. I went into my branch manager's office and said, hey, we have a client, Keith Gilbert, that's losing millions of dollars. And I fear that when he continues to lose money, his investors are going to sue us. And I think we should protect ourselves. So despite the losses and my disclosure about a client losing millions of dollars continuing to raise more money, UBS said, well, what do you have in mind? What's your thoughts? And I said, well, let me create a disclosure document. I'm a pretty good writer. They said, okay, well, what do you want in that document? I said, well, the disclosure document should state that if any of you choose to invest with Keith Gilbert's GLT fund, UBS does not solicit or endorse this investment. You are making this recommendation or investment at your own free will. Sign the document stating we did not require you to sign it. Get it? Got it? Awesome. UBS loved the idea and lauded me for creating a way to keep this account going, the steady flow of commissions, while he continued to generate commissions, while he continued to lose money, but we were protected by this disclosure document. Of course, I called Keith and I said, hey, but anytime you ever send us some money, let alone 3 cents or 5 million, get this disclosure document signed. And he said, sure, no problem, of course. So for those of you that might have bought a home or a car, think about the time you signed all of that paperwork. Did you go through every page? Did you scrutinize every page that you signed? Well, I can assure you, when we send that disclosure letter to Keith, the hedge fund manager, and he put it in his offering memorandum for his clients to sign and all the pages you have to sign to invest in a hedge fund, I guarantee you, I wasn't there, but I guarantee you he slid that disclosure document in, got it signed, sent it to us. That's all we cared about. We would take the money and we would continue to trade. But in a time when you're generating that amount of commissions every month and your client's dishonest and unethical like me, he's going to need some help. He needed some help from the bank. And I began to get some calls from his investors or potential prospects. And the call would be very, in my mind, not a big deal. So, hi, this is Justin. And they say, hello, my name is Joe. I'm considering investing in the GLT Venture Fund. Do you think I should invest in the fund? And I'd say, well, we're not allowed to, recommend these investments. And Keith is the hedge fund manager, not us. And they'd say, well, yeah, but Keith told me to call you. Should I invest in the hedge fund? I'd say, well, all I can tell you is we've worked with Keith for a while. He's a client of our firm. We value his business. And that's all that I can tell you. Thank you. By saying that, I gave my client credibility, credence that he had not earned. What should I have said? Are you insane? Run. Do not give 1 penny to this guy. He loses every dollar that was given to him. I never thought about doing that. Ever. Instead, the money came in, got the disclosure document signed, and it was business as usual. And I received many of those calls. I didn't tell someone to invest. I didn't tell them not to invest, but I gave my client credibility that, frankly, he had not earned. I let him leverage off the UBS brand by saying that he was a client. Well, then nothing happens for many months. That's the thing with white-collar crime. The FBI beautifully pieces these things together, but there can be gaps. And indeed, there were many gaps. And nothing happened for many months until I got a call from Keith that said, hey, bud, I need you to attend a meeting with me and a prospect named John, who's thinking about giving $4 million over to the fund. Until that time, I'd only spoken with people. I didn't see anyone. And I was like, I'm unavailable. He's like, it's too late. I'm on my way down there with John. I need you and Kenny there. We're going to have lunch downstairs. This guy's considering giving me or selling me his $4 million book of business. I need you to tell him about UBS and the relationship that we had. So I don't want to say that he was forceful, but I knew when you got a guy generating $100,000 a month and I felt protected with a disclosure letter, that I was going to have to put some work in and earn that business and attend that meeting as much as I didn't want to. I never thought about firing the client, never thought about walking away. I'd grown too addicted to the commissions and that lifestyle of appearing successful, knowing that a lion's share of my income was from a fraudulent hedge fund manager. So I attended that meeting, and my senior partner, Kenny, said to this gentleman, John, so why are you thinking about turning your portfolio over to Keith? And John said, well, have you seen the rate of return on his hedge fund? Performance sells itself. So I looked over to my partner, Kenny, like, why would you ask such a dumb question? Just shut up. If any of you know me, I have a tendency to talk too much. I'm sorry. That was one time I was quiet. I didn't say a damn word other than to my broker, my client, to Kenny, shut up. I didn't want to hear about a return. I didn't want to hear why he was selling his book of business. I wanted to get upstairs to our office. And when I did, I said, dude, we're in trouble. This guy's going to give him his $4 million and a return exists, or he thinks it exists, and it does not. And what did we default to? The trades are unsolicited. We got the disclosure document signed. We don't make the recommendation or solicitation. And those rationalizations allowed us to continue to work with this hedge fund manager. But eventually things began to come undone. In October 2004, my client sent out a press release that said he was due to speak at a prestigious London investment conference. And at the end of this press release, it said Capital Management Group operates no-load funds. And over the past 7.5 years, the average returns in excess of 27% net of all fees. So Kenny and I and others at UBS, we read this release that said his hedge fund is getting more than 27% a year. We knew that was a lie. He had lost every damn dollar he ever brought to us. In fact, at times he owed the firm money because he was on margin. And I don't know what some of you would do if you read an email that you know not to be true. I'll tell you what I did. See the delete button on your keyboard? Delete. Sure, they could prove that it came onto my server, but how could they prove I read it? Delete, acted as if I never saw it. That's it, as if I never saw it. It's pretty easy to do that after you lie to investors and mislead and create disclosure documents. I had gone down this bad road for so long upon graduating USC with no ethics, not continuing to cultivate character. After that many years, it was very easy to delete emails that you know not to be true. I never would have made that decision the day I graduated USC. I had coaches that had held me accountable. But going down this bad, negative path for many years, I didn't even think twice about deleting the email. Then it came undone December 15th of 2004. I was on a lunch date at Houston's in Century City. My branch manager called and said, I need to see you back at the office in 10 minutes. And I said, well, I'm on a lunch date. I can't be there in 10 minutes. He said, get your ass back to the office. And I said, okay. As I made that walk through the Century City Mall, I knew that my life was about to change forever. Frankly, I knew my life would change the day I took my client's business in June of 2002. Walked into my branch manager's office. I see my assistant, Kate. Kenny, who was dating Kate, was sort of a nightmare compliance manager, and my branch manager hands me a document. And this document is apparently a letter on UBS letterhead, And this letter is written as if I had actually written the letter. And it says, Mr. Gilbert, the above referenced accounts at Capital Management Group with UBS Financial Services as the custodian. I mean, it's so poorly written. I would never write a letter like this. Anyway, in the unlikely event that Capital Management Group ceases to exist or can no longer perform its duties as portfolio manager to its clients, all assets are guaranteed and insured for their full market value by UBS Financial Services. And he signed my name. So when he signed my name, we knew that he had forged it, and we knew that things were about to come undone, and it was every person, out for themselves. So my branch manager said to me, would you feel comfortable having a call with corporate compliance the next day and, discussing this? As I knew, and we all knew an investigation was going to begin. I said, sure, I'll talk to him. I felt protected because we had the disclosure document. I totally disclosed the losses of this hedge fund client. And I was like, sure, let's have a conversation. Everybody knew. Well, look, I knew that I should get a lawyer. My mom's been a paralegal for more than 30 years, okay? But I lacked the discipline and patience and wisdom to get a lawyer. Instead, I figured I could just get this behind me. So the next day, I interviewed with UBS corporate counsel for 8 hours, and I told them the truth about this hedge fund, well, some of the truth, about the losses and the commissions and the disclosure document. And at the end of that interview, they said, we don't want you to come in until this is resolved. And I'm like, what about Kenny, my senior partner? They said, don't worry about him. I said, okay. So that was December 16th of 2004. Nothing happened for a few weeks. My client Keith is calling me hundreds of times, finding out if I know anything. My senior partner Kenny has given me some updates that the investigation has began. He mentioned the Securities and Exchange Commission, and I'm thinking, wow, this could be bad. And then on January 11, 2005, my branch manager called me and said, can you come into the office? And initially I thought I was going to get my job back. I mean, I had been truthful. I had disclosed it. I created the disclosure document. I mean, come on, how much more can I do? And on the 11th of January 2005, when I walked into my branch manager's office, he quickly told me that I had been fired. I said, why? He said, for inconsistent answers I gave during that interview with UBS corporate counsel. I said, so you're not firing me for working with this hedge fund manager who's lost millions of dollars. You're firing me for inconsistent answers I gave. He said, yes. I gave him my key card. I look down the hallway. I see two large, security guards standing outside my office, and I start calling people. Hey, I decided to resign from UBS. I want to pursue some more entrepreneurial activities. A lot of stress in that business. I'm going to go raise money for hedge funds and do real estate deals. I mean, I start calling clients, and I don't even know what I'm saying. Well, Kenny, of course, knew that I was responsible for a lot of the clients. So he asked me to call some of the clients, essentially lie to them and tell them a story that I had left at my own will and keep their book of business behind with him at UBS. I said, sure, under the idea that down the road he would compensate me. Good luck on that compensation. And again, I guess I deserve it because I had already taken from him. Two bad guys doing a lot of bad things. There's not a lot of, ethics going on at the time. So that's the way it goes. That's January 11, 2005. Nothing happens for a month besides me spinning tales and lies about why I left UBS. And then things begin to change. And the 20th of April, 2005, 5 knocks on my front door. It's the FBI. And it's nerve-wracking when the FBI shows up at your home. It's a little bit scary. And they walked in, they had a box. Like every email I think I'd ever sent, they have in these folders and binders. It's incredible. And I've lectured at the FBI Academy, so I know what young agents do in white-collar crime. They look at our emails and text messages. It's pretty damn scary. So I was freaked out. And I said, the FBI's in my home. And I said I should probably get a lawyer. And they said, yeah, it's probably a good idea. So I called a civil lawyer, not a criminal lawyer. I was too stupid. Still never thought about jail. Called a civil lawyer. Gave him money, should have flushed that money down the toilet because I wasn't prepared to work openly and honestly with him because I was in such denial about why I had left my job. I didn't think I did anything wrong. Okay, I disclosed the losses. I thought it was insane that they were wasting my time. So about a month later, we interviewed with the FBI. But over the prior month or after the FBI had showed up, the civil lawsuits start coming down. And everyone's getting sued. Me, my client, Kenny, the firm, my assistant, everyone. But I wasn't really worried, so I called the civil lawyer who my mom had worked for and said, hey, do me a favor, call UBS and just let them know that you're representing me. He called me back in about 10 minutes and he said, do you want the good news or the bad news? I said, well, give me the good news. He said, well, I'm going to reduce my hourly rate. I'm like, all right. He's like, the bad news is UBS is claiming you were a rogue employee who acted alone in facilitating this fraud. They will not be covering your legal fees. And that's like where you pop open the bottle of wine and pour the red glass of wine. And I'm like, I'm sorry, could you say that one more time? UBS won't be covering my legal fees? No. You're responsible for this. You were the lead broker on the account. So I'll reduce my legal fees, but I need $30,000. I'm like, $30,000 for what, man? It's like civil lawsuits. You got to defend yourself. I'm like, UBS is going to defend me. Are you insane? They're not defending you. beginning to write checks, not owning it, not acknowledging what I did, covering up. Meet with the FBI about a month later. After they showed up at my home, the 20th of April, 2005, I'd go to jail 3 years to the day later. They walk in, and the first question they ask, Justin, did you ever see a press release that talked about 27.5%? Now, I mentioned a few minutes ago that I had deleted a press release that I got through email. And I told myself, well, how could they prove that I read it? I deleted it. Yeah, they could show it was on my server, but probably while I've been giving this talk today, you've gotten some emails that you've deleted, right? We all do it. I said, no, I don't remember an email. And I was dismissive, a little rude, arrogant. I wanted them to see me as the young, nice Jewish kid from Encino who was a student athlete who managed money. He was a volunteer. I didn't want them to see me as a criminal, someone who makes victims of others and exploits others for his own gain. I wanted them to see me as a good person. So I lied to them, which I later learned is obstruction. And I said, no, I don't remember an email. And then the FBI agent smiled, and he reached into his binder of documents, and he read an email where I'm arguing with my client. And my client said to me, I've never lied to you. And I said, is that the pot calling the kettle black? I enjoyed your press release talking about the guaranteed return fund and 27% a year. 27% a year. The FBI agent said, do you remember a press release? And I said, there might have been a press release. That's obstruction. That lie is what ultimately sent me to federal prison. I learned that when I lectured at the FBI Academy, that had I been truthful, I never would have been prosecuted. My lawyer abruptly ended the meeting, and I said to him, like, how did it go? It didn't go so good. And I said, what happens next? He said, I don't know, but you're in trouble. Then guess what? Nothing happened for a year. Zilch, nada, nothing. I mean, I played a lot of golf. I drank a lot. I smoked. I partied. I put on weight. And I got a real estate license, and I was crushing it selling real estate in the Southern California market. I mean, all you needed was 2 cents to qualify for a home, and I'd sell it to you. It was pretty easy. So while I was doing that over that year, I would occasionally get some calls from my former client, Keith, and he'd apologize. Dude, how are you? I'm sorry that I swept you into this. I know that you wanted to help me. I was like, hey, dude, it's all good. I wanted to help you. It looks like this has gotten behind us. Not such a huge deal. I'd still have some conversations with Kenny, who is still at UBS. And I'm like, hey, it's all fine. We've moved on. I'm having success in real estate. I was so grateful the FBI had forgotten about me. I mean, I interviewed with him. Nothing happened for a year. And I remember driving to work sometimes saying, wow, I stole the commissions from Kenny, and I facilitated these lies through this hedge fund. I didn't get caught either time. I'll never do it again. I'll never do it again. Thank you. And day after day, I figured the more they knew that I was selling real estate and they weren't worried about me, it was all good. That changed. The 28th of April, 2006, 1 year to the day after the Fed showed up at my front door. And I read a release that says hedge fund manager agrees to plead guilty to securities fraud. And at the bottom of this, it said Gilbert also admitted that he conspired with an account manager in a major brokerage firm to mislead GLT about the performance, the risk with the fund, and oversight of the major brokerage firm. My mom, who's a research hawk, called me and said, are you the unnamed co-conspirator? And I said, it can't be me, Mom. I've been selling real estate for more than a year. How would the FBI let me sell real estate? It can't be me. But I knew that it was. And my heart was pounding, and I couldn't believe it. And I called my lawyer and said, what does this mean? He said, here's the deal, Justin. You're looking at 7 years in jail. Your client's looking at 2 years. I said, 7 years for what? He said, Justin, well, you've been in La La Land playing golf, selling real estate, and lying to the FBI. Your co-conspirator, Keith, has been cooperating. He had cut a deal. I've read his plea agreement. He's agreed to cooperate. And when he called you, the feds were listening. And he drew me in. And I don't blame him, by the way. He knew his highest value was his family. He had 4 children. He wanted to get home. The message is, it doesn't matter who's more culpable, who orchestrated or created the fraud. I've learned through my work. Those who cooperate first, get in first, have more favorable outcomes than those who have been more involved tangentially or on the periphery. It often doesn't matter who created or orchestrated the fraud or who was swept in. It's a crazy, twisted criminal justice system. And I learned that I'm looking at 7 years in jail. But I was adamant that I was not guilty. Adamant about it. And I agreed to take a lie detector test. And I cheated and lied my way through this lie detector test that cost, $7,000 that I should have flushed down the toilet. And after I failed that lie detector test, I knew that my life had changed. And for a moment, I can understand how some even contemplated suicide through this process, because I didn't think this white Jewish kid from Encino could do 7 years in jail, let alone 7 days or 7 minutes. Well, after failing that lie detector test, my lawyer said, you have an option. You're going to probably do 10 years in jail, because you've lied to the feds. You haven't accepted responsibility. I think you're a really bad guy. And I think you are too, because you've never really told us the truth about what you did. And I'm in this phase of denial, and life is falling apart. And then I said, I'm not really sure what to do. I don't know what to do. What do I do? I don't want to go to jail. I don't want to go to jail. I don't want to go to jail. I'm just freaked out. And they said, okay, we're going to give you some time to think about it. And I got the first big break of my life. I got a call from my lawyer about a month later that said, Justin, you got a big break, bud. I said, what? He said, your client Keith has been indicted on new charges. I said, for what? And, Keith was indicted for some new criminal activity while he was cooperating. I'm not really sure. I guess the moral is when you're working with the government, you don't lie and commit new charges. But the benefit to me was everything that he had said against me could not be used, that he was a known liar. And my lawyer said, you're still going to jail, but you'll have a second chance at veracity and to tell the FBI what you did. And you can draw this out and go to trial and get 10 years and lose, or you can cut a plea deal immediately. I said, okay, fine, I'll cut a deal now. Didn't think that I was guilty, didn't feel bad. All I thought about was the end game, shortening my prison term. I had a break, I had an opportunity. I seized it when my co-conspirator got indicted on new charges. So in July of 2006, I agreed to plead guilty. And I didn't sign a plea agreement until January of 2007, actually on my birthday, January 2007. I agreed to plead guilty to one count of conspiracy to commit securities fraud and facilitating this fraud on behalf of my client. I acknowledge my misrepresentations. The truth is I didn't feel a lot of that guilt at the time. I said and did things because I wanted to get the least onerous sanction. I was still blaming UBS. I was still blaming my senior partner who had his job. I was still deferring to the disclosure letter that we had created and felt that I was swept into an aggressive corporate culture that exploited me as the young broker and made me pay the price. That was the story in my mind, though I sold a different story to others because I was more fixated on the end game, keeping my ass out of jail. In between February of 2007 and my guilty and my sentencing in April 2008, life continued to derail. Indeed, the hardest part of this process is before you go to prison, not actually life in prison. And over that next year, I still sold real estate because I had to pay those damn lawyers. I wasted like $15,000 on a PR firm to try to push down my Department of Justice press releases. And I remember begging David Willingham, the U.S. attorney, to not issue a press release. I said, it will destroy my mom. I beg you not to issue that release. And he said, Justin, I have to. I need young stockbrokers to know the consequences of cheating. I have to use your story as a deterrent. I'm sorry. Of course I'm going to issue a press release, which is still there till this day. And shortly after that press release, it was in the Los Angeles Times. It was so embarrassing. I remember walking into a Starbucks and I saw the LA Times and my name was in it, so I actually bought all of the papers. Then I went to a Whole Foods and Trader Joe's, anywhere like Ralph's, anywhere I spent like $70 on papers thinking like if I bought every LA Times that the problem would go away. But I did forget about one powerful thing called Google. Yeah, Google. And I went home one night, had a glass of wine, sat back, typed in Justin Paperny, enter, and it was like the New York Times, the LA Times, law blogs, people wishing for bad things to happen to me in prison, and I was dying to get in. Things were coming undone, and I was so fixated on myself, I didn't think about the pain and shame I was bringing to my family. I was angry, I was upset. I said that I was sorry, I was not, that I was remorseful, I was not. I turned over some money to pay restitution under the guise that it was best for the victims. I did it to try to keep my ass out of jail. I was a fallen young man who made terrible decisions and deserved to pay a heavy price. And the judge told me as much on February 2008 when he sentenced me to 18 months at Taft Federal Prison Camp. After I was sentenced, I had 60 days to get my affairs in order. And prior to my surrender to prison on the 28th of April 2008, I knew in many ways the government had won. They won not just because they got 18 months. They won because they also got the 3.5 years that I fought my case. And when people say, oh, you only served 18 months, I feel the need to remind them that no, I served 5 years. The 3.5 years I spent fighting my case together with the 18 months in federal prison. And I know it sounds cliche to say that I became ethical from prison, but I didn't really get it till I went to prison. I didn't get the pain and shame I brought to those who loved me in prison. And I share some of those stories in my book, Lessons from Prison, or upon my release I wrote Ethics in Motion. I share the case studies of some of my clients. And let me close with a couple of takeaways. There is no rationalization that can excuse what I did. There is no excuse. I was raised to know right from wrong. I knew better. I knew that it was wrong to cheat, steal, and lie, and I now know there are heavy consequences, deservingly so. We could argue the length of sentence that people like me should get, but I deserve to go to prison, and I deserve to be held accountable. And let me close with a common takeaway I get for those who commit white-collar crime. People, I read some of the message boards and say, these guys must be stupid. They must be dumb. No. I've worked with guys that have 2 cents left to their name and some that were worth $1 billion and everything in between. They're doctors, they're lawyers, they ran big businesses, small businesses. They're my friends, they're good people who are loved. Let me tell you what they did and what I did. We made decisions without considering how it would influence the rest of our lives, our families' lives. And I urge all of you, before you send an email or send a text message or attend a meeting where you might hear something that you know to be inappropriate, think about how you'll respond, because everything you say or do will influence the rest of your life. And if you can have that thought process of before you do something, of asking yourself, how will this influence my life in 5, 10, or 15, or 20 years? You'll never endure the shame and disgrace that so many good people endure as a result of their experience through the criminal justice system. For those of you embroiled in struggle, practice on telling your story. Own the pressures. Own the rationalizations. Own the opportunities you seized. And if you created victims, as I did, work to make amends. Work to demonstrate that you can be better, not just through words, but through your actions. I will always regret the victims I helped create. I will regret the pain I brought to my family. I will always regret not accepting responsibility sooner. And I will always regret not continuing to cultivate character upon graduating from USC. For those of you watching, I hope you learned from how I told my story. I hope you practice it every day. Share it with your loved one. Share it with a mentor. Talk about it 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes. Own that story. If you've accepted responsibility, share it. If you've created victims, let them know how you're going to make amends. Thank you very much for watching. It's still tough to tell my story after all of these years, but I'll close how I opened. I ask you, when you reach out to me to tell your story, I in turn wanted to do the same. I wish you all well. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.